My multi-millionaire sister nearly killed me and her own daughter in a blizzard over a $120 hotel bill. But that was just the cover story for a crime so sick it makes me want to vomit. I just discovered that while I was fighting to keep my car from sliding off an icy cliff, the pink backpack my 6-year-old niece was clutching was not filled with toys, but with enough illegal narcotics to send her father to prison for 20 years. I am a broke law student who just wanted to help, and Harper is the wealthy socialite who decided my life was cheaper than a tank of gas. She did not care if we crashed. She just needed us to deliver the evidence to frame her ex-husband. She turned me into a drug mule without my consent and used her own child as the bait. My hands are still trembling as I type this because I am holding the memory card that proves everything. I have the power to put my sister behind bars and leave my niece without a mother. But the guilt is eating me alive, even though I am the victim. She is outside my door right now, crying and telling me that family protects family. But does family try to kill you to win a divorce settlement? I am staring at the phone, about to call the police, but my heart is breaking into a million pieces. What would you do? My name is Willow Vance. I am 21 years old, a second-year law student at the University of Chicago. And if you looked at my bank account right now, you would see a negative balance that makes my chest tighten every time I open the app. I live in a studio apartment the size of a walk-in closet in a neighborhood where the police sirens serve as a nightly lullaby. My desk is a graveyard of tort law textbooks, empty instant noodle cups, and final notices from the electric company. I am not living. I am surviving. I am holding my breath, waiting for the day my degree pays off, waiting for the day I can stop calculating the cost of every single calorie I consume. But today, the suffocating anxiety was not coming from my student loans. It was coming from the caller ID flashing on my cracked phone screen. Xiao Ting Hao Ling. 2# is greater than Harper. My sister is 35. Beautiful in that manufactured, high-maintenance way that requires weekly chemical peels and a soul made of Teflon. She married a real estate mogul, 15 years her senior, moved into a gated community in the suburbs, and effectively retired from the human race to become a full-time socialite. I stared at the phone. My thumb hovered over the decline button. I knew I should not answer. Every time I answered, I lost something. My time, my dignity, or, in most cases, my sanity. But then my eyes drifted to the overdue rent notice magnet clipped to my mini fridge. I needed money, and Harper, despite her faults, was the only bank that would approve my loan applications, provided I paid the interest and humiliation. I slid my thumb across the screen. Her voice was not a greeting. It was a command. Willow, I need you. Now, she did not ask how I was. She did not care that it was finals week. She did not care that the weather forecast was predicting a historic blizzard sweeping down from Canada. I need you to pick up Chloe from her boarding school. The driver called in sick, probably hungover. Useless people. I need you to drive up there and bring her to the house for the Christmas party tomorrow. I rubbed my temples, feeling a headache blooming behind my eyes. The boarding school was 4 hours away, 8 hours round trip. In December. Harper, I have an exam in 2 days, I said, my voice sounding smaller than I intended, and the Weather Channel said the roads are going to be icy. Cannot you send a car service? There was a pause on the other end, the kind of silence that was heavier than a scream. A car service? Do you know how much they charge for a holiday rush booking? Harper let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. Look, I will pay you. I know you are desperate. You are always desperate. Come get the cash and go. Do not make me beg. Willow, it It is unbecoming. I closed my eyes. I was desperate. That was the hook she always used to reel me in. "Oh, fine," I whispered. An hour later, I pulled my beat-up sedan up to the wrought iron gates of her community. The guard looked at my rusted bumper with suspicion before buzzing me in. The contrast was nauseating. My world was gray, slush, and concrete. Hers was pristine white snow on manicured lawns, heated driveways, and houses that looked like museums. I parked in front of her massive colonial-style mansion. I walked inside, the warmth of the house hitting me instantly. It smelled of expensive pine candles and apathy. Harper was in the foyer, checking her makeup in a gilded mirror. She looked flawless, cashmere sweater, diamond studs, hair perfectly blown out. She did not look at me. She just held out a hand with a few bills in it. "Here, for gas and a snack." I took the money, 2 $20 bills, $40. I looked at the bills, then at her. "Harper, it is an 8-hour round trip. Gas is nearly $4 a gallon right now. This will barely get me there, let alone back. And if I need food, Sawi Jing Haling, R. Jing Hao Dayu." She finally turned to me. Her eyes were ice blue, cold and sharp. "You know, Willow, for someone who claims to be smart enough for law school, you are terrible with finances. Maybe if you drove more efficiently, you would not burn so much fuel." It was not about the math. It was never about the math. It was about control. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Is that it? Just 40? Harper took a step closer, invading my personal space. The scent of her perfume was overpowering. "Do not look at me like that. Do not act like I owe you. Remember when you were 18? Remember my Range Rover? Remember how you forgot to engage the parking brake and it rolled into the lake? Mark paid for that. We paid for that. You have been in debt to this family for years. Willow, consider this interest payments." There it was, the ancient sin. The accident happened 3 years ago. I was a terrified teenager who made a mistake she would never let me bury. I looked down at my boots, melting dirty snow onto her marble floor. I felt small. I felt owned. "Okay," I said softly. "I will go." "Good," she said, turning back to the mirror to adjust an invisible flaw on her cheek. "Oh, and Willow, one more thing." She said it casually, like an afterthought. "If the weather gets bad, Sao Yu Tsing Haoling, 2 hash is greater than do not waste money on a hotel. You know how they price gouge during the holidays? It is disgusting. If you get stuck, just take Chloe to Mark's place." My head snapped up. "Mark? Your ex-husband Mark?" Harper waved her hand dismissively. "Yes, Mark. He has that cabin out in the boonies, near the pass. It is on the way. He is not there. Obviously, he is probably passed out in some bar in the city, but I still have a key hidden under the planter. Just crash there if you have to. Do not spend my money on a Motel 6. I frowned. This felt wrong. Harper and Mark had a divorce that could only be described as nuclear. She hated him. She told everyone he was an abusive alcoholic. Why would she want me to take her daughter to his house? "Are you sure?" I asked. "I thought you guys were Sao Yu Ting Haoling, or Jing Hao Dayu. Just do as you are told." "Willow," she snapped, her mask slipping for a second to reveal the jagged anger underneath. "God, why do you have to make everything a debate? Just get my daughter and bring her home, or save yourself the drive and go back to your rat hole apartment. It is your choice." It was not a choice. It was an ultimatum. I clenched the 2 crumpled $20 bills in my fist. My nails dug into my palms. I will get her, I said. I turned and walked out of the mansion, into the biting cold air. The sky above was a heavy, bruised purple. The wind was picking up, whipping my hair across my face. It felt like nature itself was trying to warn me. I got into my car and threw the $40 onto the passenger seat. It looked pathetic sitting there. $40. I thought to myself, my sister is worth millions, and she prices her daughter's safety at $40. I started the engine. It sputtered before roaring to life. I checked the gas gauge, quarter tank. I would have to stop soon. As I drove away from the mansion, leaving the safety of the gated community behind, I had a sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach. It was not just the storm coming. It was something else, a red flag waving frantically in the back of my mind. Why Mark's house? Why was she so insistent on saving a few $100s on a hotel when she was wearing shoes that cost more than my tuition? I pushed the thought away. I just had to drive, get Chloe, come back, get paid, survive another month. I turned onto the highway. The first flake of snow hit my windshield, then another. The world was turning white, and I was driving straight into the dark. The drive to St. Jude's Academy usually took 4 hours on a clear day, with the gray sky pressing down on the highway like a lead blanket. It took nearly 5. By the time I pulled up to the imposing brick gates of the boarding school, the first real wave of the storm had arrived. It was not the gentle, romantic snow you see in Christmas movies. This was hard, pellet-like snow that hit the windshield with the sound of throwing sand against glass. I parked in the designated pickup zone, my heater rattling as it fought to keep the cabin temperature above freezing. I saw her immediately. Chloe was standing by the administration building entrance under the stone archway. She looked impossibly small. At 6 years old, she was a miniature version of Harper, but with none of the sharpness. She wore a wool coat that probably cost more than my car, and a pink scarf wrapped 3 times around her neck. But it was her posture that made my stomach turn. She was not bouncing on her heels, excited to go home for the holidays. She stood rigid, her knuckles white as she gripped the straps of her backpack. It was a bulky, heavy-looking thing that seemed to pull her shoulders down. I got out of the car, the wind immediately stinging my cheeks. "Chloe," I called out, forcing a bright smile I did not feel. She looked up, and for a second, I saw pure relief wash over her face before it was replaced by a strange, guarded expression. She ran to me, but instead of hugging me, she just pressed her side against my leg, shivering. "Hi, Auntie Willow," she whispered. "Let us get you inside." "Sweaty, it is freezing out here," I said, reaching for her backpack. "Here, let me put that in the trunk." "Saluting Haling. Due cancelletto e maggiore di no." Her scream was sharp and sudden. I recoiled, startled. Chloe's eyes were wide with panic. She clutched the bag to her chest. Stepping back from me, I, Saluting Hao, Ling. 2 hash is greater than I have to keep it with me. She stammered, her breath coming in visible puffs of white mist. "Mommy said I have to keep it with me. It has my Saluting Hao Ling. 2 hash is greater than my special things." I looked at her, confused. Harper was not the type of mother to care about a child's trinkets, but the wind was howling, and I did not have the energy to argue with a 6-year-old. "Okay," I said, holding up my hands in surrender. "You can keep it. Just get in the car, please." We pulled out of the school driveway and back onto the main road. The atmosphere inside the car was heavy, Chloe sat in the booster seat in the back, the backpack on her lap, her arms wrapped around it like a life preserver. I glanced at her in the rearview mirror. She was staring out the window at the darkening tree line. "Auntie Willow?" she asked softly. "Yeah." "Bug? Did Mommy say we are going to Daddy Mark's house?" My hands tightened on the steering wheel. That question again. It sent a cold shiver down my spine that had nothing to do with the broken heater. "Why would you ask that, Chloe?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. "Mommy wants you home for the party." Chloe bit her lip. She looked down at her backpack. She told me, "Sao yu ting hao ling. 2# is greater than," she said, "if it snows really bad. I might see Daddy Mark." She said I have to be brave. I felt a sudden spike of anger. Why would Harper confuse the poor kid like that? Mark and Harper had been divorced for 2 years. It was a messy, hateful separation. Harper had a restraining order against him. She claimed he was dangerous. So why was she planting the idea of visiting him in her daughter's head? "It is just in case, sweetie," I said, lying through my teeth to comfort her. "But we are going to try to get you home to your warm bed." "Okay." I turned the radio on to drown out the awkward silence. The music was interrupted almost immediately by the harsh tone of the emergency broadcast system. "Sao yu ting hao ling. 2# is greater than severe winter storm warning in effect for all counties north of the pass. Motorists are advised to stay off the roads. Visibility is expected to drop to near zero. Wind gusts up to 50 miles per hour. Sao yu ting hao ling. R ting hao dayu." I looked out the windshield. The snow was coming down faster now. Thick sheets of white that swirled in the headlights. The road markings were disappearing. I could feel the tires slipping slightly on the asphalt. I cannot do this. I thought, this is suicide. I grabbed my phone and hit speed dial for Harper. It rang 4 times before she picked up. Background noise of clinking glasses and laughter filled the line. She was already starting the pre-party festivities. "What is it now, Willow?" Her voice was slurred, just slightly. "Harper, listen to me," I said, leaning forward as I squinted through the windshield. "The weather is getting bad, really bad. The radio just issued a severe warning. They are telling people to stay off the roads. Oh, for God's sake." Harper Seahill, the sound of ice cubes hitting glass echoing in my ear. "You are so dramatic. It is winter, Willow. It snows in winter. I am serious." "Harper, I cannot see 20 feet in front of me. I have Chloe in the car. It is not safe. I should turn back to the school or find a hotel near here. Do not you dare," she hissed, her voice dropping an octave. "Do not you dare waste my money on a hotel room when you are barely an hour away from the pass. You are just lazy. You want to stop and sleep because you are weak. I am thinking about your daughter's safety," I shouted, my patience snapping. "My daughter is fine," Harper yelled back. "Just drive the car. Willow, if you stop, you are paying for that hotel yourself. And do not expect a dime from me for gas. Do you hear me? Drive. And if you absolutely cannot handle a little snow, go to Mark's. It is right off exit 42. She hung up. The dial tone hummed in my ear. A lonely, flat sound. I lowered the phone, my hand trembling. I looked in the rearview mirror. Chloe had fallen asleep, her head lolling to the side, but her hands were still gripping that pink backpack. I was alone. I was driving a car with bald tires into a historic blizzard with a child in the back seat, commanded by a woman who cared more about saving $100 than she did about our lives. The snow was piling up on the wipers now. The world outside was vanishing, eaten by the white void. I had passed the point of no return. I kept driving, but deep down, I knew something terrible was waiting for us in the dark. The world had ceased to exist. There was no sky, no road, no trees. There was only the hypnotic, terrifying swirl of white rushing toward the windshield like a million tiny meteors. The headlights of my sedan cut through the gloom for maybe 10 feet before being swallowed whole by the void. My knuckles were not just white, they were translucent against the steering wheel. The heater was blasting at full power, but I was shivering violently. It was a cold that started in the marrow of my bones. Keep it steady, I told myself. Just keep it steady. Do not touch the brakes. Do not jerk the wheel. Beside me, the radio had dissolved into static. The cheerful Christmas carols from earlier had been replaced by the low, ominous hum of the storm. In the rearview mirror, I could barely see Chloe. She was a shadow in the back seat, silent and still. I prayed she was asleep. I did not want her to see my hands shaking. I did not want her to see that her aunt, the adult who was supposed to protect her, was terrified out of her mind. We were on the mountain pass now. I knew this road. In the summer, it was a scenic drive with breathtaking drops into the valley below. Right now, those drops were invisible jaws waiting to swallow us. Then, it happened. A sudden gust of wind, stronger than the others, slammed into the side of the car. It felt like a physical blow from a giant hand. The sedan lurched to the left. Instinct, stupid and primal, took over. I tapped the brakes. It was the wrong move. The tires lost their fragile grip on the asphalt. The steering wheel went limp in my hands. The car began to slide, not forward, but sideways. The world outside the window tilted. The roar of the wind was drowned out by the sickening silence of a vehicle no longer under human control. Auntie Willow, Chloe's scream shattered the air. It was a high, thin sound that pierced straight through my chest. I fought the wheel, turning into the skid just like the driving manual said. But physics did not care about manuals. We were a 2-ton sled on a sheet of black ice. The car spun a full 180 degrees. The headlights swept across the darkness, illuminating nothing but falling snow, and then, for a heartbeat, the guardrail, or rather, the lack of one. We were sliding backward toward the edge of the ravine. I slammed my foot on the gas, praying for traction. The tires spun, whining high and desperate. Then, with a jarring thud that rattled my teeth, the rear bumper slammed into a snowbank. The car rocked violently and came to a halt. Silence returned, heavier than before. I sat there, gripping the wheel, my breath coming in short, jagged gasps. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I looked out the back window. The red glow of the taillights illuminated the snowbank. Beyond it was darkness, absolute, bottomless darkness. We were inches from the drop. I unbuckled my seatbelt with trembling fingers and turned around. Chloe, are you okay? She was huddled in the corner of her seat, her eyes wide and wet. She was clutching that pink backpack so tight her knuckles were blue. I want my mommy, she whimpered. I know, baby, I know. I turned back to the front, my mind racing. I grabbed my phone. No signal. Of course, we were in the dead zone of the pass. I tapped the GPS screen on the dashboard. It flickered, trying to reroute. Destination, Mark Sterling's residence. Distance, 42 miles. Estimated time of arrival, 1 hour and 15 minutes. I stared at the screen. 42 miles. In this weather, 42 miles was an eternity. To get to Mark's cabin, I would have to drive up and over the ridge, into the heart of the storm, where the winds were likely double what they were here. Harper said it was on the way. Harper lied. It was suicide. If you go there, you die. A voice in my head whispered. It was cold and rational, and you take the kid with you. But Harper's voice was there too, screeching in my memory. Do not waste my money. Do not be weak. I looked at the fuel gauge. The needle was dipping below the quarter tank mark. The spinning tires had burned precious fuel. If we got stuck again on the way to Mark's, we would freeze to death before morning. I cannot do it, I said aloud. The words felt heavy, like a confession. I carefully maneuvered the car forward, inching away from the precipice. I did not turn toward the pass. Instead, I crawled forward, looking for any sign of life. 10 minutes later, a neon sign emerged from the white haze. It buzzed and flickered, the red letters struggling against the storm. The Pine View Motel. Vacancy. It was a dump. A long, single-story strip of rooms with peeling paint and a parking lot that looked like a graveyard for rusted vehicles. Under normal circumstances, I would not have stopped here to use the bathroom, let alone sleep. But tonight, it looked like the Ritz-Carlton. I pulled under the awning of the office, shielding the car from the worst of the snow. Stay here, Chloe. Do not open the door for anyone, I said. I ran inside. The office smelled of stale cigarette smoke and bleach. Behind the counter sat a man who looked like he had been part of the furniture since 1980. He wore a stained flannel shirt and watched a small television with dead eyes. Do you have a room? I asked, my teeth chattering. He looked me up and down, taking in my terrified expression. My expensive coat, a hand-me-down from Harper, and the snow melting in my hair. He smiled, and it was not a nice smile. It was the smile of a predator sensing weakness. Storm is bad out there, he drawled. I just need a room, please. Holiday rates apply, he said, pointing to a handwritten sign taped to the plexiglass. I looked at the sign. It said $80. Fine, I said, reaching for my wallet. 120, he corrected. What? The sign says 80. That is the regular rate. It is Christmas Eve, and there is a blizzard, supply and demand. Sweetheart, 120, cash or credit? I stared at him. I wanted to scream. I wanted to reach across the counter and shake him. This was extortion. This was robbery. But then I thought of the car spinning on the ice. I thought of the ravine. I opened my wallet. The two $20 bills Harper had given me stared back mockingly. $40. That was all she thought our lives were worth. I pulled out my emergency credit card. It was a student card with a $500 limit, and I knew I was already hovering around $350 from textbooks. This charge would max it out. It might even decline. I held my breath as he swiped the card. The machine beeped. 少于井号令, 2# is greater than approved. I let out a breath I did not know I was holding. Room 7, he said, tossing a plastic key fob onto the counter. Checkout is at 10. No pets. I ran back to the car. We are staying here. Chloe, I said, opening the back door. Grab your things. Chloe hesitated. She looked at the motel door, then at me. Mommy is going to be mad, she whispered. She said no hotels. I reached in and unbuckled her seatbelt. My patience was gone, replaced by a fierce, protective exhaustion. Mommy is not here, Chloe, I am. And I am telling you we are not driving another mile tonight. Now grab your backpack. We walked into room 7. It was freezing. I cranked the heater unit under the window, and it groaned to life, smelling of burning dust. The carpet was a suspicious shade of brown, and the bedspread looked like it had not been washed in a decade. But there were 4 walls and a roof. I locked the door and engaged the deadbolt. Then I dragged a chair under the doorknob. Chloe sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing her coat. She had not let go of the backpack. She sat it next to her, patting it gently. "Why are you holding that so tight?" I asked, sitting on the other bed and rubbing my face. "Is there a special toy in there?" Chloe looked down. Her lower lip trembled. "It is a secret," she murmured. "Mommy said it is a surprise for Daddy Mark. If we see him." "A surprise?" "Yeah. She put it in there before I left. She said, 'Sao yu tsing ha ling.' 2 hashes greater than she said Daddy Mark needs this to feel better." I frowned. Harper giving Mark a gift? That sounded about as likely as the sun rising in the west. Harper hated Mark. She spent every family gathering detailing his failures. Why would she send him a care package? And why hide it in a 6-year-old's backpack? "Can I see it?" I asked gently. Chloe shook her head vigorously. "No." Mommy said, "Do not open it." She said if I open it, the surprise is ruined and Daddy Mark will go to jail. My blood ran cold. "What did you say?" She said Daddy Mark will go to jail? Chloe nodded, tears spilling over her cheeks. She said Daddy Mark is in trouble, and this will help him. But if anyone sees it, he goes to jail forever. That is why I have to be brave. I stared at the pink backpack. It sat there on the dirty motel bedspread, innocent and terrifying. A knot of dread formed in my stomach, tighter and heavier than before. This was not right. None of this was right. The insistence on driving to Mark's house in a blizzard, the refusal to pay for a hotel, the secret package that could send someone to jail. I stood up and walked to the window, pulling back the curtain slightly. The snow was burying my car. We were trapped here, and for the first time, I realized the storm outside was not the only thing threatening us. There was a storm inside our family, dark and twisted, and I had just driven straight into the eye of it. I looked back at Chloe. She had curled up on the bed, exhausted, her hand still resting on the bag. "I am not going to open it," I whispered to myself. Not yet, but I knew, with a sinking certainty, that whatever was inside that bag was going to change everything. And it was going to cost a lot more than $120. The night in room 7 was not restful. It was a vigil. The heater unit under the window cycled on and off with a sound like a dying animal coughing, battling the sub-zero temperatures trying to force their way through the thin glass. I lay on top of the covers, fully clothed, staring at the water stains on the ceiling that looked like continents on a map of a world I did not want to visit. Beside me, in the other bed, Chloe tossed and turned. She was trapped in a nightmare, her small face scrunching up in distress. "No, Mommy, please," she whimpered, her voice thin and high in the stagnant air. I did not lose it. I kept it safe. "Do not be mad." I sat up, my heart aching. A 6-year-old child should dream of sugar plums or reindeer, especially on the eve of Christmas Eve. She should not be dreaming of her mother's anger. It was a terrifying glimpse into the psychological architecture of my sister's home. Harper did not just parent, she governed. She ruled through fear and expectation. And clearly, that reign of terror extended into her daughter's subconscious. I reached across the gap between the beds and gently stroked Chloe's hair. She flinched at my touch before settling down, her hands still white-knuckled around the strap of that pink backpack she refused to take off. Even in sleep, what did you put in there? Harper? I thought, looking at the bag. What kind of leverage are you storing in a first grader's luggage? Morning came not with sunlight, but with a dull, gray lightning of the sky. The storm had passed, leaving behind a world buried under 3 feet of snow. The roads were treacherous sheets of white marble, but at least the visibility had returned. I shook Chloe awake. She looked groggy and pale, dark circles bruising the skin under her eyes. We have to go. Bug, I said softly. Mommy is waiting. At the mention of her mother, Chloe sat bolt upright. She checked the backpack immediately, counting the zippers as if to ensure nothing had been stolen in the night. Did we go to Daddy Mark's? She asked, looking around the shabby room. No, I said. We stayed here. We are safe. We got back into the car. The engine groaned in protest against the cold. But it started. I navigated the car out of the unplowed motel lot and back onto the highway. The drive to Harper's estate took another 3 hours of white-knuckled tension. We passed 3 cars in ditches, abandoned and covered in snow. Silent monuments to what could have happened to us if I had listened to Harper. When we finally rolled up to the Vance Sterling estate, the contrast was jarring enough to give me whiplash. The driveway was perfectly plowed and salted. The massive house was decked out in tasteful, expensive garlands. A catering van was parked near the garage, and men in white uniforms were carrying crates of wine into the side entrance. I parked my dirty, salt-crusted sedan next to Harper's gleaming Mercedes. I felt like an intruder, a stain on a perfect painting. Let us go, I said to Chloe. We walked through the front door. The house was warm and smelled of cinnamon and roasted meat. Harper was standing in the foyer, directing 2 maids on where to place a massive poinsettia arrangement. She turned when she heard the door close. She did not rush over to hug her daughter. She did not check to see if we had all our limbs. She glanced at her platinum watch. You are late, she said. Her voice was crisp, devoid of any relief. I expected you by 10. It is almost noon. The stylist is coming at 1 to do Chloe's hair for the party. I stood there, feeling the exhaustion crash over me. I had not slept. My clothes smelled like motel smoke. My nerves were frayed wires. There was a blizzard. Harper, I said, my voice hoarse. The roads were closed. We barely made it. Harper rolled her eyes, a gesture she had perfected since high school. Excuses. Always excuses with you. Go upstairs. Chloe, Nanny Greta is waiting to get you bathed. You look like a vagrant. Chloe looked at me, then at her mother. She clutched her backpack tighter. Mommy, Saoyudzing Haling, 2 hash is greater than I brought the bag. Harper's eyes snapped to the backpack. For a fleeting second, I saw a flash of intense, predatory focus. Good girl, Harper said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Go put it in my closet, the hidden safe. Right now, do not let anyone see. Chloe nodded and sprinted up the stairs. Desperate to please, I watched her go, then turned back to Harper. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the crumpled receipt from the Pineview Motel. I smoothed it out on the marble console table between us. Here, I said. Harper looked at the piece of paper like it was contaminated waste. What is this? The hotel bill, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. It was $120, plus $40 for gas. I put it on my emergency card. Harper, I need you to reimburse me. I literally have $11 in my checking account. Harper picked up the receipt with 2 fingers. She read the total, then let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. $120 for one night at a roadside motel? It was price gouging. I explained, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks. It was an emergency. We slid on the ice. We almost went off the road. Almost implies you did not, Harper countered, dropping the receipt back onto the table. I told you specifically, Willow. I told you to go to Mark's cabin. It was free. It was on the way. But you chose to ignore me. You chose to play the martyr and stay at a hotel so you could come here and present me with a bill. I stared at her. My brain could not compute the level of narcissism required to twist a near-death experience into a financial scam. I did not do this to spite you, I shouted, my voice echoing in the high-ceilinged foyer. The maid stopped and looked over. I did it to save your daughter's life. The visibility was 0. Lower your voice, Harper hissed, stepping closer. You are embarrassing yourself, and you are lying. You just wanted to avoid Mark's house because you are lazy. You did not want to drive the extra hour. It was not an hour. It was death. I am not paying this, Harper said, her face setting into a mask of stone. I gave you $40. That was the budget. If you cannot manage your money, that is your problem. Consider this a lesson in fiscal responsibility. Maybe next time, you will listen to the person who actually pays the bills. She turned her back on me and started walking toward the kitchen. Get cleaned up if you want to stay for the party, but do not expect a handout. Willow, I am done enabling you. I stood there, frozen. The injustice of it felt physical, like a punch to the gut. I looked at the receipt on the table, $120. To her, it was a rounding error. To me, it was groceries for a month. But it was not just about the money anymore. It was about the look in her eyes when Chloe mentioned the backpack. It was about the cold, calculated way she had commanded her daughter to hide it. Go put it in the hidden safe. Something inside me snapped. It was a quiet snap, like a twig breaking under a heavy boot. The fear and the deference I had carried for my sister for 20 years evaporated, replaced by a cold, burning curiosity. I am not leaving, I whispered to the empty foyer. I was going to find out what was in that bag, and I was going to make sure Harper paid. One way or another, the air in the living room was thick enough to choke on. The fire crackled cheerfully in the oversized stone hearth, completely oblivious to the Cold War taking place a few feet away. Harper sat on her beige linen sofa, sipping a glass of sparkling water with a slice of lemon, looking every inch the queen of her suburban castle. I stood by the door, still wearing my coat, my hands clenched into fists so tight my nails were cutting crescent moons into my palms. The silence stretched, elastic and tense. Finally, Harper set her glass down on a coaster with a deliberate, soft click. Why are you still standing there? Willow, you are dripping melted snow on my Persian rug. I took a step forward. My legs felt heavy, but my mind was sharpening, focusing into a single point of clarity. Why did you really want me to go to Mark's house? I asked. Harper Sehil, a long, exaggerated exhalation of boredom. Are we still on this? I told you, to save money, to give you a free place to sleep. Why are you so obsessed with finding a conspiracy where there is only generosity? Generosity? I let out a short, bitter laugh. You have not spoken a kind word about Mark in 3 years. You have a restraining order against him. You told the judge he was a violent alcoholic, and suddenly, in the middle of a blizzard, you are sending your 6-year-old daughter and your sister to break into his cabin? Harper's expression did not change, but her fingers tightened slightly around the armrest of the sofa. It is not breaking in if I have a key. Willow, and Mark is not there. It is an empty house. God, you are so dramatic. This is why you are failing law school. You overthink everything. I am top of my class. Harper, I said quietly. She waved a hand dismissively. Whatever, you are failing at life. Look at you, begging for scraps, trying to extort your own sister for a hotel bill because you were too cowardly to drive in a little snow. 小雨静候令. 2# is greater than cowardly. Something hot and molten rose in my chest. I almost died. Harper, I screamed. The sound tore out of my throat, raw and ugly. We spun out on the pass. We were inches from the ravine. Chloe was screaming. And all you care about is $120? Harper stood up. Her face was flushed now, her eyes narrowing into slits. Do not you raise your voice at me in my house. You are pathetic. Willow, you are a leech. You have been a burden on this family since the day Mom died. You lost my car. You borrow money you never pay back. And now you are trying to guilt-trip me because you are incompetent behind the wheel? She stepped closer, invading my space, her perfume suffocating me. You know why I wanted you to go to Mark's? Because I am sick of paying for your mistakes. I thought maybe, for once, you could be useful. I thought maybe you could do one simple thing without screwing it up. But no, you had to play the victim. You had to stop at that motel. You probably pocketed the cash and slept in the car. Did you not? The accusation hung in the air. Absurd and cruel. I looked at her, really looked at her. I saw the fine lines around her eyes that no cream could hide. I saw the emptiness behind the blue irises. I saw a woman who had everything and valued nothing. Is that what you think? I asked, my voice deadly calm. You think I stole $120? I think you are capable of anything when you are desperate. Harper sneered. Now get out. I do not want to see your face at the party. I will have the driver take Chloe back to school after the holidays. You are fired from being her aunt. She turned to walk away. Wait, I said. Harper stopped but did not turn around. Why did Chloe have a package for Mark in her backpack? Harper's shoulders went rigid. The air in the room seemed to freeze. She turned around slowly. Her face had lost its color. What did you say? Chloe told me. I continued, watching her reaction closely. She said she had a surprise for Daddy Mark. Something you put in there. Something that would send him to jail if anyone saw it. Harper walked back to me. Her movements were stiff, robotic. She is a child. Willow. She has an active imagination. She seemed terrified. Harper. She was protecting that bag like it was a bomb. What was in it? Nothing. Harper shouted, losing her composure for the first time. It was just 小雨静候令. 2# is greater than some old papers of his. Some junk mail. I wanted her to drop it off so he would stop bothering me about it. You wanted her to drop off junk mail in the middle of a historic blizzard? I asked, raising an eyebrow. At a house he does not live in? When you have a restraining order preventing you from contacting him? Harper's face twisted into an ugly snarl. Shut up. You do not know what you are talking about. You are just trying to stir up trouble because I will not pay your stupid bill. I looked at the keys to my car in my hand. Then I looked at the keys to Harper's Mercedes, sitting on the console table. I am not trying to stir up trouble. Harper, I am trying to figure out why you were willing to risk our lives. And I think I just did. I walked over to the console table and picked up my car keys. You are right, I said. I am leaving. Good, Harper yelled. Get out, and do not come back until you are ready to apologize on your knees. I walked to the door. My hand touched the cold brass handle. I paused. I am not going to apologize, Harper, and I am not coming back, but I am going to make a phone call. Who are you going to call? Your imaginary boyfriend? No, I said, opening the door and letting the cold wind rush in. I am going to call Mark. I slammed the door shut before she could respond. I walked down the driveway to my car, my heart pounding in my ears. I sat in the driver's seat, staring at the mansion that looked so perfect from the outside. It was over. The years of servitude, the guilt, the manipulation, it was all over. I pulled out my phone. My hands were shaking, not from cold, but from adrenaline. I did not have Mark's number saved. Harper had made me delete it years ago, but I remembered he still worked at the architecture firm downtown. I searched for the number on the browser. Sterling and Associates. Xiaoyu Jinghao Ling. 2. I dialed. It rang. Once, twice. Hello, this is Mark Sterling. His voice sounded tired, rougher than I remembered. Mark, I said. It is Willow. There was a long silence. Willow, is everything okay? Is Chloe okay? I took a deep breath. She is safe. She is here at Harper's. But Mark, Xiaoyu Jinghao Ling. 2 hash is greater than we need to talk. Harper tried to make me take her to your cabin last night. During the storm. My cabin? Mark's voice sharpened instantly. Willow, I have not been to that cabin in 6 months. The pipes are burst. There is no heat. And Xiaoyu Jinghao Ling, 2 hash is greater than weight. Did you say she wanted you to go there? Yes, and she sent a package with Chloe. She hid it in her backpack. I heard a sound on the other end of the line. It sounded like a chair being knocked over. Willow, listen to me very carefully, Mark said, his voice trembling with urgency. Do not let that package stay in that house. You have to get it, or you have to tell me exactly what it looks like. Why? What is going on? Mark, because, he said, and I could hear the fear in his voice. Harper just filed a police report this morning. She tipped them off anonymously that I was stashing stolen jewelry and narcotics at my cabin. She told them to go look today. My blood turned to ice. If you had gone to the cabin last night, Xiaoyu Jinghao Ling, 2 hash is greater than Mark continued, his voice breaking. If you had walked in there with that bag, Xiaoyu Jinghao Ling, 2 hash is greater than the police would have found you. They would have found the drugs on my daughter. I dropped the phone into my lap. I stared at the dashboard. She set us up. She set her own daughter up as a mule to frame her ex-husband. She sent us into a blizzard to deliver the evidence for a crime she invented. The rage that filled me then was not hot. It was absolute zero. It was the kind of cold that burns. I picked the phone back up. Mark, I said, I am going to fix this. The silence inside my car was heavy, a physical weight pressing down on my chest. Outside, the winter sun was trying to break through the gray clouds, casting a weak, pale light on the snow-covered driveway. But inside the vehicle, it felt like midnight. I held the phone to my ear, my hand trembling so violently that I had to use my other hand to steady it. Mark was still talking on the other end, his voice a mixture of panic and exhaustion, but his words were coming through a tunnel of static in my brain. I forced myself to focus. As a law student, I had been trained to look for facts, to dissect evidence, to find the narrative thread in a mess of chaotic information. But this was not a case study in a textbook. This was my life. This was my niece. Mark, slow down, I said, my voice sounding incredibly distant to my own ears. You said Harper filed a police report? What exactly did she say? I could hear Mark taking a ragged breath. She called the sheriff in Summit County this morning. Willow, my lawyer, just called me. She tipped them off anonymously. She claimed that I have been using the cabin as a stash house for distribution. She told them I was hiding cocaine and stolen jewelry from our marital assets up there. I felt the blood drain from my face. My stomach lurched. Cocaine? I whispered, Mark, you do not. So you Tsinghao Ling are Tsinghao Dayu. No, Mark shouted, his voice cracking. Of course I do not. I have been sober for 3 years. Willow, you know that. I go to meetings 3 times a week. I get tested voluntarily for custody hearings. She knows that. That is why she had to plant it. The pieces of the puzzle slammed together with the force of a car crash. The bulky pink backpack. Chloe's terrified insistence that she could not let it go. Harper's command to hide it in the safe immediately upon arrival because the plan had failed. She used Chloe, I said, the realization tasting like bile in my throat. She used her own 6-year-old daughter as a drug mule. It gets worse. Willow, Mark said, his voice dropping to a whisper that was more terrifying than his shouting. Do you know about the restraining order? Yes, I said. Harper told me you are dangerous. She said she has an order of protection. She lied about the terms. Mark said, it is a strict no-contact order. If I am within 500 feet of Chloe without court supervision, I go to jail. If Chloe is found on my property, even if I am not there, it is considered a violation of the custody agreement and grounds for immediate termination of my parental rights. It is considered kidnapping or endangerment. I stared out the windshield at the massive brick mansion looming in front of me. It looked like a fortress. So, let me get this straight, I said, my voice trembling with a cold, simmering rage. Harper tried to force me to drive Chloe to your cabin in a blizzard. If we had made it there, one of 2 things would have happened. 1, the police raid the cabin based on her tip, find me and Chloe there with a bag full of drugs, and you get arrested for distribution and child endangerment. You lose custody forever. Exactly, Mark said. Or, I continued, my mind going to a darker place. 2, we do not make it. We crash in the storm. We die or get seriously injured, and Harper gets to play the grieving mother on television. She gets to sue your estate for negligence because it was your cabin we were heading to. She wins either way. There was a long silence on the line. The horror of it hung between us. We were collateral damage. I whispered, $40 for gas. That is what she paid to execute this hit. She sent her sister and her daughter into a death trap to win a divorce settlement. Willow, you have to get out of there, Mark said urgently. You are liable to. If the police find that bag now, and you are the one who transported it, Sao Yu Tsinghao Ling, or Tsinghao Dayu, I am not leaving, I said, cutting him off. Willow, do not be stupid. I am not being stupid. Mark, I am done being stupid. If I leave now, she wins. She hides the bag. She waits for another chance to frame you. She keeps Chloe, and she keeps treating me like I am nothing. I looked at the dash cam mounted on my windshield. It was a cheap model I had bought off the internet after my first fender bender. but it had a cabin view feature. A tiny red light was blinking steady and rhythmic. It had been recording. It had been recording since I left my apartment yesterday. It recorded the phone call where Harper told me to go to the cabin. It recorded Chloe screaming in the back seat. It recorded Chloe talking about the secret package and how Mommy said it would send Daddy to jail. It recorded the sound of the tires spinning on the ice and my desperate prayers as we slid toward the ravine. I have evidence. Mark, I said. Saoyu Hao Ling. 2 hash is greater than what? I have a dash cam. It recorded everything inside the car. I have Chloe's confession about the bag. I have Harper's voice on speakerphone, refusing to let me stop at a hotel. Mark let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. Oh, thank God. Willow, keep that safe. Do not let her near it. I am not going to just keep it safe, I said, my eyes fixing on the front door of the house where my sister was currently arranging flowers for her Christmas party. I am going to use it. Willow, be careful. She is dangerous. Her husband, Richard, Saoyu Hao Ling. 2 hash is greater than he is powerful. He pays for the best lawyers in the state. Richard is a businessman, I said. He deals in assets and liabilities. Right now, Harper thinks she is an asset. I am going to show him she is the biggest liability he has ever acquired. I hung up the phone. I sat there for a moment, letting the anger wash over me. It was not the hot, explosive anger of a tantrum. It was the cold, a hard resolve of a survivor. For years, I had let Harper define me. I was the screw-up, the little sister, the charity case. I had let her guilt over the car accident shackle me to her will, but the debt was paid. I had almost paid it with my life last night on that icy pass. I reached up and unclipped the dash cam from the windshield. It was small, black, and unassuming. I pulled the memory card out and slipped it into the coin pocket of my jeans. Then I put the camera in my glove compartment and locked it. I checked my face in the rearview mirror. I looked tired. My hair was messy. My eyes were rimmed with red. I looked like a victim. Good. I thought, let her think that. I opened the car door and stepped back out into the cold. The wind bit at my face, but I barely felt it. I walked up the driveway, past the catering van where workers were unloading trays of shrimp cocktail and champagne. They were preparing for a celebration. I walked up the steps to the front door. I did not knock. I still had the spare key Harper had given me years ago for emergencies. This was an emergency. I pushed the door open and stepped back into the warmth of the foyer. The smell of cinnamon was nauseating now. It smelled like a lie. Harper was in the living room, fluffing pillows. She looked up when I entered, her face twisting into a mask of annoyance. I thought I told you to leave, she said. I ignored her. I walked past her, toward the stairs. Where are you going? Harper demanded, following me. Willow, I am talking to you. I am going to say goodbye to Chloe, I said calmly, not breaking my stride. And then I am going. You are not going near her, Harper screeched. Grabbing my arm, I stopped on the second step. I turned and looked down at her. My eyes were level with hers. For the first time in my life, I did not feel smaller than her. Let go of my arm. Harper, something in my voice must have surprised her. She hesitated, her grip loosening slightly. I am going to give my niece a hug, I said, and then I am going to have a little chat with Richard. Is he in his study? Harper's eyes narrowed. Why do you want to talk to Richard? Just legal matters, I said vaguely. About the car accident. I figured, since I am a law student now, I should handle my own debts. Harper sneered. You are going to beg him for money. That is it. Is it not? You are going to cry to my husband because I cut you off. Go ahead. He hates beggars more than I do. She let go of my arm and waved me away. Make it quick, and do not touch anything. You look filthy. I turned and walked up the stairs. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady. I was not going to beg. I was going to burn her world to the ground, and I was going to use the truth as my match. I reached the top of the landing and headed toward Chloe's room. The door was ajar. Inside, Nanny Greta was brushing Chloe's hair. Chloe was sitting on her bed, staring at her hands. The pink backpack was gone. Auntie Willow, Chloe cried out when she saw me, jumping off the bed. I knelt down and caught her in a hug. She felt fragile in my arms. I just came to say goodbye. Bug, I whispered into her ear. Are you leaving? Chloe asked, pulling back to look at me. Her eyes were fearful. I have to go do some work, I said. But listen to me. Chloe, you were so brave yesterday. You are the bravest girl I know. I put the bag in the safe, Chloe whispered, leaning close so the nanny could not hear. Just like Mommy said, you did good, I said, my heart breaking for her. Now, I want you to listen to Nanny Greta. Stay in your room and play, okay? Even if you hear loud noises downstairs, just stay here, okay, she said. I kissed her forehead. It smelled of baby shampoo and innocence. I stood up and nodded to the nanny. Take care of her, I said. I walked out of the room and closed the door softly. Then I turned toward the master bedroom suite. I knew the layout of the house. I knew where the hidden wall safe was in Harper's massive walk-in closet. And I knew the code. It was her birthday. It was always her birthday, but I was not going there to steal. I was going there to confirm. I checked the hallway. Empty. I slipped into the master bedroom. It was vast, decorated in shades of cream and gold. I walked straight to the closet. It was the size of my entire apartment. Rows of designer dresses, shelves of shoes, cabinets of handbags. I moved a stack of cashmere sweaters on the built-in shelf. Behind it was the digital keypad. 0, 8, 1, 5. Saoyudzing Haling. 2. Beep. The small door clicked open. Inside, nestled between stacks of cash and jewelry boxes, was the pink backpack. I reached in and unzipped it. My hands shook slightly as I pulled the fabric apart. Inside, wrapped in a plastic grocery bag, was a clear Ziploc bag filled with white powder. Beside it was a heavy velvet pouch containing a diamond necklace I recognized. It was an heirloom from Mark's grandmother that Harper had claimed was lost during the divorce. I stared at the contents. It was enough cocaine to put someone away for 20 years. It was a felony in a bag. I pulled out my phone and snapped 3 photos. One of the open safe, one of the bag's contents, one of the backpacks sitting next to Harper's passport. Then I zipped the bag back up, closed the safe, and reset the keypad. I had the confirmation. I had the dash cam. I had the motive. I walked out of the bedroom and headed toward the west wing of the house, where Richard's study was located. Harper thought I was going to beg for scraps. She thought I was the same weak, pliable sister she had dominated for 21 years. She was about to find out that even a worm will turn if you step on it hard enough. And she had not just stepped on me. She had tried to crush me. I reached the heavy oak door of the study. I could hear Richard's voice inside. Booming on a conference call, I raised my hand and knocked. The mahogany door to Richard Sterling's study was heavy, solid, and imposing. It was a barrier designed to keep the world out, to separate the chaotic, emotional mess of family life from the sterile, calculated world of business. I stood before it, my hand resting on the cold brass knob, and took a breath that rattled in my lungs. For 21 years, I had been the mouse in this house. I had scurried around the edges, grateful for crumbs, terrified of being stepped on. But mice do not survive blizzards. Wolves do. And I had survived. I knocked. 3 sharp, deliberate raps. "Come in!" Richard's voice boomed from inside. Impatient and loud, I pushed the door open. The study smelled of aged leather, expensive scotch, and the distinct, metallic scent of money. Richard was sitting behind a desk that was large enough to land a plane on. He was a big man, broad-shouldered with silver hair that was always perfectly coiffed. He was on the phone, barking orders at some unfortunate subordinate, his back half turned to the door. "I need those contracts liquidated by noon. Gary, I do not care about the penalty fees. Just get it done." He spun his chair around and saw me. His expression did not soften. It hardened into a look of mild irritation, like he had found a fly buzzing near his lunch. He held up a finger to silence me, finished his call, and slammed the receiver down. "Willow," he said, leaning back in his chair and tenting his fingers. "To what do I owe the pleasure? Harper said you were leaving. I am leaving." "Richard," I said. I walked further into the room. I did not stop until I was standing directly in front of his desk. I did not fidget. I did not look at my shoes. I looked him dead in the eye. "But before I go, I have a business proposition for you." Richard let out a short, dry chuckle. He reached for his glass of scotch. "A business proposition? From a student with 6 figures in loan debt and a credit score that I imagine is in the basement? Let me guess. You need a loan. Harper cut you off. So you are trying to go around her. I admire the gumption, kid. But the Bank of Richard is closed today. Go ask your father if you need gas money." "Oh, wait." He smiled, a cruel, teeth-baring expression. He knew my father was dead. He knew I had no one. "It is not a loan," I said, my voice steady, devoid of the tremor that used to define my existence in this house. "And I am not here to ask for money. I am here to offer you a service. I am here to save you from a federal indictment." Richard paused. The glass of scotch hovered halfway to his mouth. He looked at me, really looked at me. For the first time, he saw the dark circles under my eyes, the messy hair, the cheap clothes. But he also saw something else. He saw the stillness. "What are you talking about?" he asked, his voice dropping an octave. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the SD card from my dash cam. I placed it gently on the polished wood of his desk. It made a tiny click sound that seemed to echo in the room. "That," I said, pointing to the small black chip, "is evidence. Yesterday, your wife, my sister, ordered me to drive her daughter to her ex-husband's cabin in the middle of a blizzard. She refused to give me money for a hotel. She endangered the life of a minor. That is bad enough, but it is what she put in Chloe's backpack that concerns you." Richard stared at the chip, then back at me. His eyes narrowed. "Get to the point. Willow, I have a party starting in an hour. The point is," I said, leaning forward, placing my hands on his desk, invading his territory. Harper planted a significant amount of cocaine and stolen jewelry in Chloe's backpack. She intended for us to deliver it to Mark's cabin so she could frame him. She tipped off the police this morning. Richard went still, stone still. The air in the room seemed to get sucked out. "Cocaine?" he whispered. "A felony amount." I confirmed. slipping into the legal jargon I had spent the last 2 years memorizing. Possession with intent to distribute, crossing state lines, using a minor as a courier, if we had been stopped, or if we had made it to the cabin. Chloe would be in Child Protective Services right now. I would be in jail. And since the package originated from this house, Soyu Jinhao Lin, R. Jinhao Dayu, I let the sentence hang there. I watched his brain work. Richard was not a moral man, but he was a smart one. He understood liability. He understood risk. You are lying, he said, but there was no conviction in his voice. Harper can be petty, but she is not stupid. She would not bring drugs into my house. I pulled out my phone. I swiped to the photo gallery and turned the screen toward him. Exhibit A, I said coldly. The photo showed the open wall safe in the master bedroom closet, the bags of white powder, the velvet pouch, the diamond necklace, and right next to it, Harper's passport, proving the location. Richard looked at the photo. His face turned a shade of gray that matched his suit. He recognized his own safe. He recognized the necklace. She stole that from Mark 3 years ago. He muttered, almost to himself. She told me she threw it in the river. She kept it. I said, just like she kept the drugs. I do not know where she got them. Richard, maybe from one of your associates? Maybe she bought them? It does not matter. What matters is that right now, there is a stash of narcotics in your master bedroom, in a safe that is technically in your house. Under the law, that is constructive possession. If the police come here, and they might, if Mark's lawyer pushes hard enough, you go down with her. Richard stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. He walked over to the window and looked out at the snow-covered lawn. I could see the muscles in his jaw working. He was recalculating his entire life. He was calculating the cost of his marriage against the cost of his freedom. Why are you telling me this? He asked, without turning around. Why not just go to the police? Because I know how this works. I said to his back. I go to the police. You hire a team of lawyers to destroy me. You paint me as the disgruntled, drug addict sister who planted the evidence. You have money. I have debt. I lose. But if I come to you, Sao Yu Jinghao Ling, Jinghao Dayu, I paused. He turned around to face me. If you come to me, you fix it. I said, you get that poison out of your house. You make sure Harper never, ever touches Chloe again. Mark gets full custody, and you ensure that my sister pays for what she did. Not with my life, not with Chloe's life, but with her own. Richard looked at me with a strange new respect. It was the respect a shark gives to another predator entering the water. You want me to destroy my own wife? She tried to kill me. Richard, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. She sent me into a blizzard with $40 and a death sentence. She does not care about you. She does not care about Chloe. She cares about winning. She is a liability. Richard, and you know what you do with liabilities. You liquidate them. He said softly. Just then, the door to the study flew open. Harper burst in, looking flustered but impeccably dressed in a red velvet gown. She stopped when she saw the two of us standing there. The tension in the room was palpable, a thick, electric charge that made the hair on my arm stand up. What is going on in here? Harper demanded, looking from me to Richard. Willow, I told you to leave. Why are you bothering my husband? Richard, whatever she asked for. The answer is no. She is just trying to... Shut up, Harper. Richard's voice was not loud. It was quiet, deadly quiet. It was the voice of a man who had just signed a death warrant. Harper froze. She blinked, confused. She had never heard him speak to her like that. "Excuse me," she laughed nervously. "Richard, honey, what did she tell you? Did she show you that ridiculous hotel bill? I told her I would not pay it, because—" "I said shut up," Richard roared, slamming his hand down on the desk. The sound made Harper jump. The glass of scotch rattled. Richard walked around the desk. He moved with a terrifying, predatory grace. He stopped inches from Harper. She shrank back, her confidence evaporating instantly. "Did you bring cocaine into my house?" he asked. His voice was a low growl. Harper's eyes widened. She looked at me, then back at Richard. Her face went pale beneath her makeup. "Saoyuting Holing. 2 hash is greater than. I do not know what she told you." "Richard, she is lying. She is a pathological liar. She's jealous of us." I picked up the SD card from the desk and held it up. "I have it on tape." "Harper," I said calmly, "I have Chloe talking about the package. I have the photos of the safe. Richard has seen them." Harper looked at the small black chip in my fingers. She looked at the phone on the desk, still displaying the image of her secret stash. The gaslighting, the manipulation, the lies, they all crumbled under the weight of hard evidence. Saoyuting Haoling, 2 hash is greater than it was for Mark." She stammered, tears welling up in her eyes. Tears of panic, not remorse. "Richard, you do not understand. I had to do it. He was going to take Chloe. I did it for us. I did it so we could be a family without him interfering. You did it for yourself." Richard spat. "You risked my career, my reputation, and my freedom. Do you know what happens to a developer who gets busted with a kilo of cocaine in his wall safe? The banks pull their funding. Harper, the city cancels the contracts. I lose everything." He grabbed her arm, not gently. "You are going to go upstairs," he hissed. "You are going to open that safe, and you are going to flush every single gram of that down the toilet while I watch. And then you are going to pack a bag." "Pack a bag," Harper whimpered. "Where?" "Saoyuting Haoling. 2 hash is greater than. Where am I going?" "I do not care," Richard said, releasing her with a shove. "But you are not staying here. I am calling my lawyer. I am filing for divorce in the morning, and I am handing over all evidence of your little plot to Mark's legal team." "No," Harper screamed, grabbing his lapels. "Richard, please, you cannot do that. I am your wife. It is Christmas. You ceased to be my wife the moment you brought a felony into my bedroom," Richard said coldly, peeling her fingers off his suit. "And as for Christmas, Saoyuting Haoling, 2 hash is greater than. Consider this your gift. You get to stay out of prison if you sign the papers and leave quietly. If you fight me, I give this SD card to the district attorney." Harper looked at me. Her eyes were filled with pure, unadulterated hatred. She looked like a cornered animal. "You did this," she hissed at me. "You ungrateful little wretch. I gave you everything. I let you be part of this family. You used me." "Harper," I said, feeling a sense of peace wash over me. I finally saw her for what she was. Small, pathetic, and utterly alone. "You used everyone, and now the bill is due." Richard looked at me. He nodded. A single, curt motion. "You can go. Willow, I will handle this. Tell Mark, Saoyuting Haoling, 2 hash is greater than. Tell him he will have full custody by the end of the week." "Thank you," I said. I did not wait for Harper to respond. I walked past her, She reached out as if to grab me, to strike me, but Richard stepped between us. A wall of gray wool and indifference. I walked out of the study. I walked down the hall, past the kitchen where the caterers were popping champagne corks. I walked out the front door into the cold, crisp air. The sun had finally broken through the clouds. The snow was blindingly white, sparkling like millions of diamonds. I got into my rusted sedan. I started the engine. It roared to life, sounding stronger than before. I looked back at the mansion one last time. I saw a figure in the upstairs window. Harper, probably watching me leave, probably screaming into the void. I put the car in gear. I had $40 in my pocket. I had a mountain of debt waiting for me at home. But as I drove down the driveway, leaving the gated community behind, I realized I was richer than I had ever been. I had my self-respect back, and I had saved a little girl from a monster. I reached for the radio and turned up the volume. A Christmas song was playing. For the first time in years, I hummed along. There is a specific speed at which gossip travels in a gated community. It is faster than light, faster than sound, and infinitely more destructive than the blizzard that had just buried the state. In Harper's world, information was currency, and for the first time in her life, she was not the one spending it. She was the one being sold. I did not go back to my apartment immediately. I sat in my car, parked just outside the perimeter of the Stone Creek Estates, watching the iron gates that used to intimidate me. I felt a strange, detached curiosity. It was like watching a controlled demolition of a skyscraper you had been forced to clean for 20 years. Richard moved with the ruthlessness of a man saving his own skin. Within 2 hours of my leaving the study, the first police cruiser rolled through the gates. It was not a raid with sirens and lights. It was a silent, ominous black SUV belonging to the county sheriff, followed closely by a sedan bearing the emblem of Child Protective Services. I watched from a distance as the invisible dome of perfection over Harper's life began to crack. The rumors started on the neighborhood Facebook page. I still had access to it. A remnant of the days when Harper forced me to monitor it for complaints about her hedges. Did anyone see the police at the Vance Sterling residence? I heard Richard filed for an emergency divorce. My housekeeper told me there were drugs involved. Hard drugs. Child Protective Services? Oh my God. Poor Chloe. The comments scrolled by. A digital ticker tape of judgment. The same women who had sipped champagne with Harper at her garden parties. The same women who had voted her president of the Homeowners Association were now dissecting her downfall with surgical precision. There is no loyalty among the elite when the scent of scandal is in the air. There is only the desperate need to distance oneself from the infection. The real show, however, happened the next morning. I drove by the local coffee shop, the one Harper practically used as her second office. It was the hub of the social hierarchy, the place where the PTA moms gathered to judge the parenting skills of everyone else. Harper was there. She must have stayed at a hotel the night before. Or perhaps she had refused to leave the driveway. She looked disheveled. Her coat was buttoned wrong. Her hair, usually a helmet of perfection, was windblown and flat. She was marching toward the entrance of the coffee shop, her chin held high in a fragile, desperate imitation of her former arrogance. She was trying to pretend everything was normal. She was trying to bluff a hand she had already lost. I parked across the street and lowered my window. Harper pushed open the glass door. I could see the heads turn inside. The chatter stopped. It was the kind of silence that has weight. I watched through the storefront window as Harper approached a table of women. Her inner circle, I recognized them. Linda, the treasurer of the charity board. Susan, whose husband played golf with Richard. Harper smiled, a brittle, terrifying thing, and reached out to touch Linda's shoulder. Linda recoiled. It was a small movement, barely an inch, but it was violent in its rejection. Linda said something, her face cold and hard. She pointed toward the door. Harper froze. She looked around the room. Every pair of eyes was either staring at her with open disgust or studiously looking away. The barista, a young girl Harper had reduced to tears on multiple occasions over foam ratios, was watching with a look of pure, unadulterated schadenfreude. Harper backed away. She turned and stumbled out of the shop, nearly tripping over the threshold. When she stepped onto the sidewalk, she saw me. I was sitting in my rusted sedan, sipping a gas station coffee that cost $1. I did not wave. I did not smile. I just watched. Harper's face twisted. The mask fell away completely. She stormed across the street, ignoring the traffic, her heels slipping on the icy pavement. She slammed her hands onto the hood of my car. "You," she screamed. Her voice was raw, shredded by a night of screaming at Richard. "You did this. You poisoned them against me." I rolled down the window an inch. I did not say a word to them. "Harper," I said calmly, "you did this. You did this when you put narcotics in a 6-year-old's backpack. Liar," she shrieked, drawing the attention of passers-by. People were stopping on the sidewalk, holding up their phones. The camera lenses were black eyes, unblinking and cruel. "You kidnapped my daughter." "That is what I told the police." "You took her to a motel against my will." "You are the criminal." It was pathetic. She was trying to rewrite reality in real time, but the ink would not dry. Richard showed the dashcam footage to the sheriff. "Harper," I said, "they know you refused to pay for the hotel. They know you ordered us to the cabin, and they have the bag." Richard gave it to them. Harper's face went slack. The fight drained out of her, leaving only a hollow, trembling shell. "Richard gave it to them?" she whispered. "He had to," I said, "to save the company. You became a liability." Harper slumped against my car. She looked around at the people filming her. She looked at the coffee shop where she was no longer welcome. She looked at the gated community in the distance where the locks had already been changed. She was homeless. She was friendless. And soon, she would be defendant number 1. The sound of sirens cut through the morning air. I checked my rearview mirror. A police cruiser was turning the corner. Lights flashing. Harper pushed herself off my car. She looked at me one last time. There was no anger left, only a terrifying realization of her own insignificance. "Help me, Willow," she whimpered. "Please, I am your sister." I looked at her. I thought about the blizzard. I thought about the ravine. I thought about the $40. I shifted the car into drive. "I am just a law student." "Harper," I said, "you are going to need a criminal defense attorney, and I hear they are very expensive." I pulled away from the curb just as the police cruiser pulled up behind her. I did not look back to see them putting the handcuffs on. I did not need to see it. The fallout was complete. The society she had worshipped had chewed her up and spit her out, proving the one rule Harper had never understood. If you build your castle on a foundation of ice, you should expect it to melt when the heat turns up. I drove toward the highway. I had a meeting with Mark and his lawyer to give my official deposition. For the first time in my life, I was driving toward the truth, not away from it. The silence that follows a hurricane is often more unsettling than the wind itself. You expect the world to be loud, to be screaming in protest at the destruction. But instead, there is only a ringing quiet. That was how I felt sitting in the corner booth of a diner on the south side of the city. It was not the kind of place Harper would ever be caught dead in. The vinyl seats were cracked. The coffee tasted like burnt hazelnuts. And the waitress called everyone hun, regardless of their age or social standing. I was waiting for Mark. When he walked in, I almost did not recognize him. The man I remembered from family gatherings was hunched, shadowy, always nursing a drink in the corner while Harper held court. This man walked with his head up. He looked tired. Yes, but it was the good kind of tired. The exhaustion of a man who had fought a war and won. He slid into the booth opposite me. He did not say a word at first. He just looked at me with eyes that were terrifyingly blue. Just like Chloe's. You look terrible, Willow, he said, a small smile touching his lips. I feel terrible, I admitted, wrapping my hands around the warm ceramic mug. I have not slept in 48 hours. I have an exam tomorrow that I am definitely going to fail, and my car is making a noise that sounds like a dying cat. Mark reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a folded check and slid it across the sticky table. I stared at it. It was made out to me. The amount written on the line was $85,000. It was the exact amount of my student loans, plus enough to buy a reliable car. What is this? I asked, my voice flat. It is freedom, Mark said seriously. It is a fresh start. You saved my daughter. Willow, you saved my life. Richard told me everything. He told me about the dash cam. He told me how you stood up to Harper. This is the least I can do. I looked at the numbers. $85,000. It was a life-changing amount of money. It was the end of the late nights, the ramen noodles, the crushing anxiety that sat on my chest every morning. All I had to do was pick it up. I reached out and put my finger on the corner of the check. Then, slowly, I slid it back across the table toward him. I cannot take this. Mark, Willow, do not be proud, he urged, pushing it back. You earned it. No, I said firmly. If I take this, it becomes a transaction. It means I did it for the money. It means I was an employee. I did not save Chloe because I wanted a payout. Mark, I saved her because I am her aunt, and I want to be her aunt, not her savior for hire. Mark looked at the check for a long time. He saw that I meant it. He saw that taking that money would make me feel like I was just another version of Harper, putting a price tag on loyalty. Okay, he said softly, putting the check back in his pocket. Then what do you want? I pulled the crumpled, coffee-stained receipt from the Pineview Motel out of my pocket. I placed it on the table. $120 for the room. I said, $40 for gas and $500 for a consultation fee. I am a law student. After all, my time is billable. Mark laughed. It was a genuine, full-bellied sound that made the waitress look over and smile. He pulled out his wallet and counted out $660 in cash. Deal, he said. We finished our coffee in a comfortable silence. When we walked out into the cold afternoon air, I felt lighter, not richer, but lighter. I had seen Harper one last time before coming here. It was outside the precinct where she had been processed and released on bail pending her hearing. She was waiting for a rideshare because Richard had taken the cars. She looked small. The arrogance that had been her armor for 35 years was gone, leaving behind a shivering, pathetic woman in a coat that was not warm enough for the weather. She had grabbed my arm as I walked past. Her grip was weak. Willow, she had whispered, her voice trembling. "We are sisters. Blood is thicker than water. You cannot leave me like this." "I have nothing." I had looked down at her hand on my sleeve. I remembered the feeling of the steering wheel sliding on the ice. I remembered the fear in Chloe's eyes. Blood might be thicker than water. "Harper," I had told her, pulling my arm away. "But it is also a lot harder to clean up when you spill it." I had left her there, on the curb. I did not feel triumphant. I did not feel happy. I felt a profound, hollow sadness. I was mourning the sister I should have had, the family we could have been if she had been capable of loving anyone other than herself. Back in the parking lot of the diner, Mark gave me a hug. "You are a good person, Willow," he said. "Do not let her take that from you." I got into my car. The engine made that terrible grinding noise again, but it started. I looked at the passenger seat. It was empty. The $40 Harper had given me was gone, spent on survival. I had lost a sister. I had lost the financial safety net of my wealthy family. But as I drove away, watching the sun dip below the snowy horizon, I realized I had gained something far more valuable. I had found my spine. The courthouse steps were slick with fresh snow, a fitting metaphor for the slippery slope Harper had been sliding down for months. 6 months had passed since the blizzard, since the night the Vance family shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces. The winter had finally given way to a tentative spring. The trees lining the Judicial Plaza were budding with small, pale green leaves, a sign of new beginnings. Or perhaps just the relentless indifference of nature. I sat in the back row of the gallery, anonymous in a thrifted gray blazer. I watched as the judge read the sentencing. Harper stood alone at the defendant's table. Her legal team, paid for by liquidating her jewelry collection, had managed to plead the charges down. She avoided the 20-year sentence for distribution by cooperating with the investigation into the supplier, a shady associate of Richard's who had been using socialites as unsuspecting couriers for years. However, she could not escape the child endangerment charges or the violation of the court order. "Harper Vance Sterling," the judge intoned, her voice echoing in the wood-paneled room. "You are hereby sentenced to 3 years of probation, 500 hours of community service, and mandatory psychiatric counseling. Furthermore, your parental rights regarding Chloe Vance are hereby terminated permanently. You are to have no contact with the child or Mr. Sterling." Harper did not cry. She did not scream. She just stood there, staring at a spot on the floor, looking like a statue made of salt that might dissolve if the wind blew too hard. She was gaunt. Her roots were showing, a harsh stripe of dark brown against the faded blonde dye. The it girl of the suburbs was gone, replaced by a cautionary tale when the gavel banged, finalizing the end of her world. She turned. Her eyes scanned the room until they found me. There was no hatred in them anymore, just a vast, terrifying emptiness. She looked at me as if waiting for me to fix it, waiting for the little sister to swoop in and clean up the mess like I always had. I stood up and walked outside. The air was crisp and smelled of rain. Mark was waiting by his truck near the curb. Chloe was in the back seat, strapped into her booster. She saw me through the window and waved furiously, a big, gap-toothed smile on her face. She looked happy. She looked like a child, not a pawn. I walked over to the truck. Mark rolled down the window. "It is over?" he asked. "It is over," I said. Mark nodded. He looked at the courthouse doors where Harper was being escorted out by her lawyer. "Does she have anyone?" he asked quietly. I shook my head. Richard divorced her and moved to Florida. Her friends abandoned her the second the indictment came down. She has a studio apartment downtown, paid for by the last of her settlement. She has to get a job. Mark Sihil. A sound of pity mixed with relief. Do you want a ride? We are going for ice cream. Chloe insists that mint chocolate chip is a vegetable. I smiled, shaking my head. No, I have to study for the bar exam, and I need to stop by the station. The station? I reached into my pocket and pulled out a single, crumpled bill. It was old, soft with wear, torn at the corner, a $20 bill. One of the two she had given me that night. I had saved it. I have a debt to settle, I said. I walked over to where Harper was standing, waiting for a taxi that she probably could not afford. She saw me coming. A flicker of hope lit up her face. Willow, she breathed. You came. I did not say anything. I reached out and took her hand. She squeezed mine, desperate, clawing. I knew you would not abandon me. She whispered, I knew you loved me. Do you have your car? Can you drive me home? This taxi is going to cost a fortune. I pulled my hand away. I pressed the crumpled $20 bill into her palm. Here, I said softly, for gas and a snack. Harper stared at the bill. She recognized it. The irony hit her like a physical blow. Her face crumbled. Willow, Saud Singh Ling, 2 hashes greater than please. I turned my back on her. Keep it to buy some character. Harper, I said over my shoulder, my voice carrying in the quiet street. It probably will not be enough, but give it a try. I walked toward my own car. It was still the same rusted sedan, still making that awful grinding noise. I was still broke. I still had thousands of dollars in student loans looming over me. I was not the hero of a fairy tale who found a pot of gold, but as I merged into traffic, leaving the courthouse and my sister behind in the rearview mirror, I realized I had something better. I stopped at a red light. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Chloe, a picture of an ice cream cone with the caption, "We saved you a scoop." I smiled. The light turned green. I drove forward, into the spring, into a life that finally, completely belonged to me.